Ethan Cole never imagined that answering a single phone call would shatter every careful boundary he'd built around his quiet, broken life. One moment he was a mechanic scraping by, raising his daughter alone in a world that felt too small and too safe. The next, he was standing in a mansion that cost more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes, face to face with a woman whose empire was crumbling faster than her composure. What happened that night wasn't planned, it wasn't wise, and it would cost them both more than they knew. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's dive in. The call came at 11:47 on a Thursday night. Ethan Cole was under the hood of a '98 Civic in his garage, knuckles scraped raw, the fluorescent light above him flickering like it had been threatening to die for months. The wrench slipped. He cursed under his breath, wiped his hands on a rag that was more grease than fabric, and heard his phone buzzing somewhere under a pile of invoices he'd been ignoring for 2 weeks. He almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved. Out of state. Probably spam. But something made him swipe to accept, and a voice he didn't recognize came through, clipped and professional in a way that made his spine straighten. "Is this Ethan Cole?" "Yeah, who's asking?" "My name is Gerald Hines. I'm head of security for the Voss estate. We have a situation and your name came up in our contractor files from 3 years ago. I need you here, tonight." Ethan frowned, the phone pressed to his ear while he leaned against the workbench. "The Voss estate? I did some HVAC work there once. What kind of situation are we talking about?" There was a pause on the other end. Not hesitation, calculation. "Ms. Voss isn't answering calls. The staff is locked out. We can't reach her and she's not responding to security checks. I need someone who's been inside the property before, someone who knows the layout, and someone who can handle this quietly." Ethan's chest tightened. "You're telling me you can't get into your own building?" She changed the codes, the gates, the doors, the security panels, everything. And before you ask, no, we're not breaking down the door. Not until we know what we're dealing with. So call the police. "Mr. Cole," the voice sharpened. "Ms. Adrienne Voss is one of the most prominent executives in this state. If we escalate this incorrectly and she's fine, it becomes a media disaster. If we don't, and something's happened to her, we're liable. You worked on her system. You know the override protocols. I'm asking you to come here and help us make sure she's safe. Discreetly." Ethan rubbed his face with one hand, exhaustion settling into his bones. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was late. Too late. His daughter, Sophie, was asleep upstairs in the apartment above the garage. Mrs. Tron next door had agreed to check on her if he got stuck on a late job. But this wasn't a late job. This was something else entirely. "Where's the estate?" "Laurel Heights, 40 minutes north." Laurel Heights. The kind of neighborhood where the driveways were longer than his street, where people didn't fix their own cars or worry about whether the electric bill was going to clear. "I'll need an hour," Ethan said finally. "Thank you. I'll text you the address." The line went dead. Ethan stood there for a moment, phone still in his hand, staring at the oil stain on the concrete floor. He didn't know why he'd said yes. Maybe because the guy sounded genuinely worried. Maybe because 3 years ago, when he'd done that HVAC job, the estate manager had tipped him $200 cash and told him he did good work. Maybe because he was tired of every day looking exactly the same. Or maybe because he was just stupid enough to think he could step into someone else's world for a few hours and walk back out unscathed. He grabbed his jacket, checked on Sophie one more time. She was curled up with her stuffed rabbit, breathing soft and steady, and sent a quick text to Mrs. Tran. Then he climbed into his truck, a battered Ford that coughed twice before the engine turned over, and headed north. The city fell away behind him. Streetlights gave way to long stretches of dark road lined with trees that looked older than the country itself. The GPS led him through gates that opened automatically, past driveways that branched off into private estates he couldn't see from the road. Eventually, he turned onto a narrow lane marked only by a brass plaque that read Voss. The driveway was a quarter-mile long. When the house came into view, Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. It wasn't a house. It was a statement. Glass and steel and stone, perched on a hillside like it was daring the world to look away. Every window glowed faintly from interior lighting, but there was no movement, no signs of life. A man in a dark suit was waiting at the front gate. Tall, gray-haired, expression locked somewhere between concern and control. Gerald Hines, Ethan assumed. He parked the truck and got out. The air was cooler up here, sharper, the kind of quiet that felt expensive. Mr. Cole. Hines extended a hand. His grip was firm, businesslike. Thank you for coming. You said she's not answering. Correct. She dismissed the staff at 6 this evening, told them not to come back until Monday. That's unusual, but not unheard of. Around 9, I tried calling to confirm a security detail adjustment for tomorrow. No answer. I tried again at 10. Still nothing. The cameras show her entering the house at 6:15. She hasn't left. And the doors? Locked. Codes changed. The override panel isn't responding to master access. Ethan looked up at the house. From here, it looked perfect. Immaculate. Like a photograph in a magazine. But something about it felt wrong. You really think she's in danger? Hines hesitated. I think something is wrong, and I'd rather be overcautious than negligent. Ethan nodded slowly. Show me the panel. They walked up the stone steps to the front entrance. The door was sleek, black, frameless. The kind of door that probably cost more than his truck. Next to it was a security panel, digital, touchscreen. Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled through old notes. 3 years ago, he'd been given a temporary access code to work on the climate system. The override code had been written in the manual he'd been handed. He punched in the sequence. Nothing. He tried again, slower this time. Still nothing. She changed everything, Hines said quietly. I told you. Ethan stared at the panel, thinking. Then he looked at Hines. There's a service entrance on the east side, HVAC access. If she didn't change that lock, lead the way. They circled the house, their footsteps echoing on the stone path. The service entrance was tucked behind a wall of hedges, barely visible unless you knew it was there. Ethan crouched down, checked the lock. It was mechanical, old-fashioned, the kind of thing that didn't get updated because it wasn't part of the main security grid. He pulled a tension wrench and a pick from his jacket pocket. Hines raised an eyebrow. You carry lockpicks? I work on old cars. You'd be surprised how often I need to get into a locked trunk. He worked the pins carefully, feeling for the give. Besides, if she's in trouble, I'm not waiting for a locksmith. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, the house was silent. Ethan stepped through first, Hines close behind. They were in a narrow hallway that led to the mechanical room. The air was cool, temperature controlled. Everything smelled clean, sterile almost. No dust, no clutter, just expensive emptiness. Ms. Voss? Hines called out. His voice echoed. No response. They moved through the hallway into the main floor. The space opened up into a massive living area with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the valley below. The city lights glittered in the distance like scattered stars. The furniture was modern, minimal. Everything looked like it had been staged for a photo shoot. And sitting on the floor in the center of the room, barefoot, her back against the base of a white leather couch, was Adrienne Voss. She wasn't moving. Ethan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to one knee beside her. Ms. Voss? Can you hear me? Her eyes opened, slowly, like she'd been somewhere far away and it was taking effort to come back. She looked at him. Through him. Her face was pale, her hair, dark, shoulder length, usually immaculate in the photos he'd seen online, was loose and tangled. She was wearing a silk robe, cream-colored, tied loosely at the waist. Her hands were resting in her lap, and there was a nearly empty bottle of wine on the floor beside her. Who are you? She said. Her voice was quiet, flat. My name's Ethan Cole. I did some work here a few years back. Mr. Hines called me. He was worried. She looked past him at Hines, who was standing a respectful distance away, his expression carefully neutral. I told you to leave me alone, Gerald. You weren't answering your phone, ma'am. Because I didn't want to talk. With respect, Hines said carefully, you locked everyone out and went silent. That's a security concern. Adrienne laughed. It was a brittle sound, sharp around the edges. A security concern. Right, because heaven forbid the CEO has a breakdown in private. Ethan glanced at Hines, then back at her. Are you hurt? No. Do you need medical attention? No. Then why are you sitting on the floor in the dark? She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something flickered behind her eyes. Anger, maybe. Or exhaustion. Because I can. Because for once in my life, I don't have to perform for anyone. Is that allowed, or do I need to file a request in triplicate? Ethan sat back on his heels. You're allowed. Hines cleared his throat. Ms. Voss, if you're all right, we'll leave you alone. But I need you to confirm that you're safe and that you don't need... I'm fine, Gerald. Go home. Ma'am, I said go home. Hines hesitated. He looked at Ethan, then back at Adrienne. I'll be outside if you need me. He left. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Ethan stayed where he was, crouched on the floor a few feet away from her. He didn't know what he was supposed to do. Walk out? Call someone? Pretend this wasn't the strangest situation he'd ever been in? You can leave too, Adrienne said without looking at him. I know. So why are you still here? Because you're sitting on the floor in a bathrobe at midnight, and I'm pretty sure that's not normal for you. She turned her head, meeting his eyes. Hers were red-rimmed. Not from crying, exactly. More like she'd been holding tears back for so long that her body had given up trying. You don't know me, she said. No, I don't. Then don't pretend to care. Ethan stood up slowly, brushing off his knees. He looked around the room. Everything was perfect, too perfect, like a museum. You're right. I don't know you, but I know what it looks like when someone's had a really bad day. A bad day? She laughed again, softer this time. That's one way to put it. He walked over to the windows, looking out at the view. Hell of a place to have a bad day. It's just a house. It's a mansion. Same thing. Not really. She didn't respond. Ethan turned back to her, hands in his pockets. You want to tell me what happened? Why would I do that? Because I'm a stranger. And sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who doesn't have any expectations. Adrienne stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up the wine bottle, took a sip straight from it, and set it back down. My husband left me. Ethan blinked. When? This morning. Packed his things while I was in a meeting. Left a note on the kitchen counter. Very considerate of him. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. You're sitting on the floor drinking wine in the dark. You're at least a little sorry. She glared at him, but there was no real heat behind it. We were together for 18 years, married for 12. I built a company worth $4 billion. I worked 80-hour weeks. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, vacations. I did everything I was supposed to do, and he still left. What did the note say? She hesitated. Then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, she said, that he didn't recognize me anymore. That I'd become someone he didn't love. That he needed to find himself, whatever the hell that means. Ethan didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. You know what the worst part is? She continued. I don't even know if I'm upset because I lost him or because I failed at something. I don't fail, ever. And now I'm sitting here wondering if I even loved him or if I just loved the idea of having a life that looked successful from the outside. She looked up at him, her expression raw and unguarded in a way that felt dangerous. So there, that's my bad day. Happy now? Ethan crossed the room and sat down on the floor a few feet away from her. Not close enough to invade her space, just close enough to be present. Not really, he said. She frowned. Why are you sitting down? Because you shouldn't be alone right now. I told Gerald I wanted to be alone. Yeah. And I'm not Gerald. Adrienne studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. What are you exactly, some kind of good Samaritan? I'm a mechanic. I fix things. I'm not a car. I know. Then why are you still here? Ethan leaned back against the couch, stretching his legs out in front of him. Because 3 years ago, I lost my wife. Cancer. She was 31. Left me with a 4-year-old daughter and a mortgage I couldn't afford. For about 6 months, I was exactly where you are right now. And the only reason I didn't stay there was because people kept showing up. Not to fix me, just to sit with me until I figured out how to breathe again. Adrienne's expression shifted, softened, just a little. I'm sorry. So am I. They sat in silence for a while. The city lights below flickered and blurred in the glass. The house creaked softly, settling into itself. What's your daughter's name? Adrienne asked finally. Sophie. How old is she now? 7? Almost 8? Does she know you're here? She's asleep. My neighbor's keeping an eye on her. Adrienne picked at the hem of her robe, her fingers restless. I never had kids. Richard, my husband, he didn't want them. Said they'd get in the way of the business. I agreed. I thought I agreed. Now I don't know if I actually wanted them or if I just never let myself think about it. It's not too late, Ethan said quietly. I'm 43. My eggs are probably fossilized. There are other ways. She gave him a look that was half skepticism, half amusement. Are you seriously giving me life advice right now? No, I'm just saying it's not over. It feels over. Yeah, it does, for a while. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since he'd walked in, she seemed to see him as a person instead of an intrusion. You're not what I expected. What were you expecting? I don't know. Someone older, more corporate. Someone who'd tell me to pull myself together and get back to work. I'm a mechanic, Ethan said again. I don't know anything about corporate. Lucky you. He smiled. Sometimes. Adrienne exhaled slowly, like she was letting go of something she'd been holding too tight. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. You don't have to know. Not tonight. That's not how it works. I run a company. I have a board meeting on Monday. I have investors, employees, contracts, and tonight, none of that matters. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Her shoulders sagged. I'm so tired. I know. I mean, really tired. Not just physically. I'm tired of pretending, of performing, of being the person everyone expects me to be. So don't. It's not that simple. Maybe it is. Adrienne shook her head, but she didn't argue. Instead, she picked up the wine bottle again, then paused and held it out to him. Want some? Ethan took it, glanced at the label, something French and expensive, and took a sip. It tasted like money. He handed it back. Not bad. It's a 2008 Bordeaux. It cost $4,000. He nearly choked. You're drinking $4,000 wine on the floor? Why not? It's mine. Fair point. She smiled, just barely. But it was there. They passed the bottle back and forth a few more times, not talking, just existing in the same space. The tension in the room began to ease, not disappear, just settle into something more manageable. Can I ask you something? Adrienne said eventually. Sure. Why did you really stay? Ethan thought about it. Because you looked like I felt 3 years ago, and I remember what it was like when people walked away because they didn't know what to say. And you know what to say? No, but I know how to sit. She laughed. A real laugh this time, soft and surprised. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Probably. Thank you. For what? For sitting. Ethan nodded. He didn't trust himself to say anything else. They sat there until the wine was gone and the city lights below started to blur together. At some point, Adrienne's head dipped forward, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Ethan didn't move, didn't leave. He just stayed like he'd promised, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe he was exactly where he was supposed to be, even if it made no sense at all. When Adrienne's breathing finally evened out into something close to sleep, Ethan carefully got to his feet. His knees protested. He'd been sitting on that floor longer than he'd realized. The clock on the wall read 2:17 in the morning. He looked down at her, curled against the base of the couch, her face smoothed of all that sharp executive armor, and felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. He should leave, call Hines, tell him she was fine, get back in his truck and pretend this night never happened. Instead, he walked into the kitchen. It was enormous, all marble countertops and stainless steel appliances that looked like they'd never been touched. There was a sub-zero fridge the size of his bedroom, a gas range with 8 burners, and a wine rack built into the wall that probably held more money than he'd make in 5 years. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect, and everything felt completely, utterly unused. He opened the fridge. It was stocked, produce in neat rows, dairy products aligned like soldiers, bottles of sparkling water standing at attention. But none of it looked like food someone actually ate. No leftovers in mismatched containers, no half-eaten takeout boxes, no evidence of life. There was, however, eggs, butter, cream, some vegetables that looked fresh enough. Ethan pulled out his phone and texted Mrs. Tron. Still out. Sophie okay? The reply came back almost immediately. Sound asleep. Take your time, honey. He set the phone on the counter and got to work. He found a cutting board in a drawer that still had the price sticker on it. Found a knife that was so sharp it could probably perform surgery. Started chopping onions and peppers, the familiar rhythm settling something anxious in his chest. Cooking was one of the few things that still made sense to him. You followed steps, you paid attention, you created something out of nothing. Sophie loved his omelets. She'd sit at their tiny kitchen table, legs swinging, and tell him about whatever was happening in second grade while he flipped eggs and made toast. It was one of the few routines they had that felt normal. He heard movement behind him and turned to find Adrienne standing in the doorway, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making breakfast." "It's 2:30 in the morning." "Then it's a very early breakfast." She walked closer, arms wrapped around herself. "You don't have to. When's the last time you ate?" She paused. "Lunch yesterday." "Maybe?" "Then, yeah, I do have to." Adrienne leaned against the counter, watching as he whisked eggs in a bowl he'd found in a cabinet that looked like it had never been opened. "You're very comfortable in other people's kitchens." "I'm comfortable in kitchens, doesn't matter whose they are." "Most people would be intimidated." "By what? Expensive appliances?" He gestured at the range. "A stove's a stove, this one's just shinier." She almost smiled. "You're an unusual person, Ethan Cole." "I'm a guy making eggs, not that unusual." "You broke into my house, found me having a breakdown, and now you're cooking for me at 2 in the morning. That's pretty unusual." He poured the eggs into a heated pan, tilting it to spread them evenly. "I didn't break in. I used a service entrance." "That's still breaking in. Hines asked me to." "And the cooking part?" "That's just being decent." Adrienne was quiet for a moment, watching the eggs sizzle. "Why are you being decent to me?" Ethan added the vegetables, folding them into the eggs with practiced ease. "Because you're a person who's having a bad time. Doesn't seem that complicated." "Most people would see a rich woman with problems and think she doesn't deserve sympathy." "Maybe, but I'm not most people." "No," she said softly. "You're not." He plated the omelet, found some bread in the pantry that was probably artisanal or organic or whatever rich people called their bread, and made toast. Set it all on the counter in front of her with a fork he'd pulled from a drawer, organized so precisely it looked like an art installation. Adrienne stared at the plate like she didn't know what to do with it. "It's just food," Ethan said. "You're allowed to eat it." "I know that." "Then eat." She picked up the fork slowly, cut a small piece, and took a bite. Her eyes closed. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then, "This is really good." "It's eggs. It's the first thing that's tasted like anything in months." Ethan leaned against the opposite counter, watching her eat. She didn't pick at it like he'd expected. She ate like someone who'd forgotten what hungry felt like, and was just now remembering. "You cook for your daughter?" she asked between bites. "Every day." "Well, every day I'm not working late." "What is she like?" "Mac and cheese, pancakes, anything with chicken nuggets." He smiled. "She's 7. Her palate's not exactly refined." "Does she know about her mother?" The question hit harder than he'd expected. "Yeah, she knows. She was 4 when Anna died, so her memories are kind of blurry. But she knows." "That must be hard." "It is. But kids are tougher than you think. She asks questions sometimes. I answer them as best I can. We get through it." Adrienne set her fork down, looking at him with something that might have been respect. "You're a good father." "I'm trying to be. Some days are better than others." "That's all anyone can do." "Yeah, I guess so." She finished the omelet and pushed the plate away, leaning back in her chair. "Thank you." "You're welcome. I mean it. I can't remember the last time someone did something for me without wanting something in return." Ethan shrugged. "I don't want anything. Everyone wants something." "Not tonight." She studied him, her eyes searching his face for cracks, for angles, for the catch. And when she didn't find one, something in her expression shifted, softened. "You're not like the people I usually deal with." "I'd hope not. Most of the people I deal with have broken transmissions." That got a laugh out of her, a real one. "You're funny." "Not really. I'm just tired enough that I don't have a filter." "I like it." They stood there in the kitchen, the silence stretching between them, but not uncomfortable this time. Just present, real. Can I ask you something? Adrian said. Sure. Why didn't you leave when I told you to? Ethan thought about it. Because I didn't believe you actually wanted me to. How did you know? I didn't, I guessed. What if you were wrong? Then I'd have left. She shook her head slowly, like she couldn't quite figure him out. I've been around manipulative people my whole life. Investors who smile while they gut your company. Executives who compliment you while planning your downfall. People who say one thing and mean another, and you show up, a complete stranger, and you're just straightforward, honest. It's disorienting. I don't have the energy to be anything else. Life's too short to play games. My whole life is games. Then maybe you need a different life. Adrienne's smile faded. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I've built something. An empire. $4 billion in market cap. 12,000 employees. I can't just walk away from that. I'm not saying walk away. I'm saying maybe the empire doesn't have to cost you everything. It already has. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. He could see it in the way she held herself, in the exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. She'd traded her life for success, and now she was sitting in a palace wondering why it felt so empty. My wife used to tell me something, he said after a moment. She'd say, you can build the tallest building in the world, but if you build it on sand, it'll fall. I didn't really get it at the time, but I think about it a lot now. What does it mean? I think it means that the foundation matters more than the height. And if you're not standing on something solid, people you trust, things you actually care about, it doesn't matter how high you climb. Adrienne looked away, her jaw tight. I don't know what I'm standing on anymore. Then maybe it's time to figure it out. And how do I do that? I don't know. But sitting on the floor drinking expensive wine probably isn't it. She laughed, but it was hollow. You're right, it's not. Ethan glanced at the clock. 3:04. You should try to sleep. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I just think about everything I screwed up. So think about something else. Like what? I don't know, something good. Something that doesn't make you feel like garbage. Adrienne considered that. I can't remember the last time I thought about something good. Then start small. What's one thing in your life that doesn't suck right now? She thought for a long time. Long enough that Ethan wondered if she was going to answer at all. Then quietly, this. Right now. This doesn't suck. Something in his chest tightened. Yeah, it doesn't. They stood there looking at each other across the kitchen island, and the air between them changed, became heavier, charged with something neither of them had intended but both of them felt. Ethan cleared his throat. I should probably go. Do you want to? No. But I should. Why? Because this, he gestured vaguely between them, is a bad idea. Why is it a bad idea? Because you're going through something, and I'm just a guy who fixes cars. We're not in the same world. And tomorrow, when you wake up and this night feels like a fever dream, you're going to regret that I was here. Adrienne stepped around the island, closing the distance between them. What if I don't? You will. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, because that's how this works. People like you don't end up with people like me, not in real life. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. What if I'm tired of real life? What if I want something that doesn't make sense for once? Adrienne, I haven't felt like a person in years, Ethan. I felt like a brand, a logo, something people invest in or tear down depending on the quarter. And tonight, for the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel human. Because of you. So don't tell me this is a bad idea. Don't tell me I'm going to regret it. Just... She stopped, her voice cracking. Just stay. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he thought she might be able to hear it. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to walk out the door, to get in his truck, to go home to his daughter and his life and the careful boundaries he'd built to keep himself from getting hurt again. But the other part, the part that had been lonely for so long, he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to want someone. That part was louder. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I. Then maybe we shouldn't. Or maybe that's exactly why we should. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone just as scared and just as broken as he was. Someone who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. Someone who was asking him, a stranger, to be brave enough for both of them. And against every bit of sense he had left, he stayed. She reached up, her hand hesitating just before it touched his face, like she was giving him one last chance to step away. He didn't. Her palm settled against his cheek, warm and tentative, and he leaned into it without thinking. "This is stupid," he murmured. "I know. We're going to regret this. Probably. Then why are we doing it?" She smiled, sad and small. "Because I don't want to be alone tonight, and I don't think you do either." She was right. He hated that she was right, but she was. He kissed her. It wasn't smooth or cinematic. It was messy and desperate and tasted like wine and regret and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he wrapped his arms around her like she might disappear if he let go. They stumbled backward, knocking into the counter, and she laughed, a breathless, surprised sound, before kissing him again. His hands found the tie of her robe, and she didn't stop him, didn't pull away, just held on tighter like she was drowning and he was the only solid thing left. "Upstairs," she whispered against his mouth. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and she took his hand and led him through the house, up a staircase that curved like something out of a movie, down a hallway lined with art he didn't recognize, into a bedroom that was bigger than his entire apartment. The bed was massive, covered in white linens that looked like they'd never been slept in. Everything was pristine, perfect, cold. But when she turned to face him, pulling him down onto the bed with her, none of that mattered. For a while, there was no empire, no dead wife, no daughter asleep 40 minutes away, no consequences waiting in the morning light. There was just the two of them, trying to fill the emptiness inside themselves with something that felt, for a few desperate hours, like it might be enough. Later, much later, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Adrienne slept beside him. The room was still dark, but he could see the faint glow of dawn starting to creep through the curtains. His phone was buzzing somewhere in the pile of clothes on the floor. He ignored it. What had he done? He turned his head, looking at her. In sleep, she looked younger, less guarded. The hard edges she wore like armor were gone, leaving behind someone who looked fragile and human and heartbreakingly real. He'd crossed a line tonight. A big one. The kind of line you didn't come back from. And the worst part was, he didn't regret it. He should. He knew he should. But lying there in the dark, listening to her breathe, all he felt was a strange, painful kind of peace. Like he'd been holding his breath for 3 years and had just now remembered how to exhale. His phone buzzed again. He slipped out of bed carefully, trying not to wake her, and found it in his jeans pocket. 3 missed calls from Mrs. Tran. A text. "Sophie's up, asking for you. Everything okay?" His stomach dropped. He typed back quickly. "On my way. Sorry. Be there in 40 minutes. He dressed quietly, every movement feeling like a betrayal. When he was done, he stood at the edge of the bed, looking down at Adrienne one last time. He should wake her, should say something, should at least leave a note. But what would he say? "Thanks for the night. Sorry I'm a coward who's sneaking out before you wake up because I have no idea how to deal with what just happened." Instead, he walked out, down the stairs, through the house that felt even emptier now than it had before, out the front door where Gerald Hines was standing by a black sedan, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole." Ethan stopped. "She's fine. She's sleeping." "I'm sure she is." There was something in Hines's tone that made Ethan's jaw tighten. "You got something to say?" "Just that Ms. Voss is going through a difficult time, and people in difficult times make choices they wouldn't normally make." "Meaning?" "Meaning whatever happened in there tonight, it's not real, and pretending it is will only hurt both of you." Ethan stared at him. "You're giving me relationship advice?" "I'm giving you a reality check. You're a mechanic from the city. She's one of the most powerful women in the state. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a mistake." "Maybe. But it's our mistake to make." Hines's expression didn't change. "Just don't expect it to mean anything tomorrow." Ethan walked past him without another word, climbed into his truck, and drove away. The city came back into view slowly, the sun rising behind him, turning the sky shades of orange and pink that felt too pretty for how he was feeling. His phone rang. Mrs. Tron. Hey, Ethan, honey, where are you? Almost home, 10 minutes. Sophie's worried. She woke up and you weren't here. Guilt hit him like a fist. I know, I'm sorry. I got stuck on a job. At 4 in the morning? He didn't have an answer for that. I'll explain when I get there. You better. This isn't like you. She was right. It wasn't. He pulled into the alley behind his building, parked, and took the stairs 2 at a time. Mrs. Tron met him at the door, Sophie standing behind her in pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Daddy! She ran to him, and he scooped her up, holding her tight. Hey, baby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Where were you? I had to help someone. In the middle of the night? Yeah, in the middle of the night. She pulled back, looking at him with those big brown eyes that were so much like Anna's. It hurt. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. I promise. Mrs. Tran gave him a look that said they'd be having a conversation later, then patted Sophie on the head and left. Ethan carried Sophie inside, set her down on the couch, and sat beside her. You want breakfast? Are you going to leave again? The question hit harder than it should have. No, I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling the weight of what he'd done settle over him like a blanket made of lead. He'd left one broken person to come home to another, and he didn't know how to be enough for either of them. The weekend passed in a haze of guilt and routine. Ethan made pancakes Saturday morning, took Sophie to the park even though it was cold enough to see their breath, and spent Sunday fixing a carburetor on a Honda that had been sitting in his garage for 2 weeks. He kept his hands busy, kept his mind occupied, tried not to think about what he'd done. It didn't work. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Adrienne, the way she'd looked at him in that kitchen, the way her voice had cracked when she'd asked him to stay, the way she'd felt in his arms, like something precious and breakable that he had no business touching. He'd checked his phone obsessively for 2 days. No calls, no texts, nothing. Which made sense. What was she supposed to say? Thanks for the pity sex. Here's a check for your time. They weren't in a relationship. They weren't even friends. They were 2 people who'd made a mistake in the dark and now had to pretend it never happened. Except he couldn't pretend. Monday morning came too fast. Sophie dragged her feet getting ready for school, complaining about a math test she hadn't studied for. Ethan made her lunch, checked her backpack twice, and walked her to the bus stop 3 blocks away. She hugged him before climbing on, and he stood there watching the bus pull away until it disappeared around the corner. Then he went back to the garage and tried to lose himself in work. He was under a Subaru replacing a busted timing belt when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him wipe his hands and swipe to accept. Ethan Cole? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Yeah. My name is Laura Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Adrienne Voss. She'd like to meet with you this afternoon if you're available. His heart kicked against his ribs. Meet with me? Yes, 2 o'clock at our office downtown. The address is... I know where it is. There was a pause. So you're available? He should say no. Should tell her he was busy, that he had work, that whatever Adrienne wanted to say could be said over the phone. But instead, he heard himself say, Yeah, I'll be there. Excellent. Security will be expecting you. Have a good day, Mr. Cole. She hung up. Ethan stood there in his garage, phone in hand, grease on his shirt, and wondered what the hell he was walking into. The Voss Industries building was downtown, all glass and steel and aggressive modernity. 37 floors of corporate power that made Ethan feel small the moment he stepped through the revolving doors. The lobby was marble and chrome, filled with people in suits who looked like they'd been born knowing how to navigate spaces like this. He'd worn his cleanest jeans and a button-down shirt he usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. He still felt like he'd shown up to a black-tie event in work boots. Security checked his ID, made a call, and directed him to the elevators. 35th floor. Ms. Chen will meet you. The elevator was glass-walled, offering a view of the city as it climbed. Ethan kept his eyes forward, hands in his pockets, trying to look like he belonged. By the time the doors opened on the 35th floor, his palms were sweating. Laura Chen was waiting, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She extended a hand. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. Yeah, sure. She led him down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than his truck. Ms. Voss is finishing a call. She'll be with you shortly. Can I get you coffee? Water? I'm fine. Please, have a seat. She gestured to a waiting area with chairs that looked like modern art sculptures. Ethan sat, feeling the leather creak under his weight. Laura disappeared through a set of double doors, leaving him alone. He waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He was starting to wonder if this was some kind of test when the doors opened and Laura reappeared. She's ready for you. Ethan stood, wiped his palms on his jeans, and followed her inside. The office was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city, a desk the size of a boat, shelves lined with awards and books that looked like they'd never been opened. And standing by the window, back to the door, was Adrienne. She was wearing a tailored navy suit, hair pulled back, every inch the CEO. When she turned to face him, her expression was composed, professional, like Thursday night had never happened. Ethan, thank you for coming. Laura quietly excused herself and closed the doors behind her. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. You look good, Ethan said, because he didn't know what else to say. Thank you, so do you. I'm wearing jeans. I noticed. Another silence. Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets. You wanted to see me? Adrienne walked back to her desk, not sitting, just leaning against it with her arms crossed. I wanted to apologize. For what? For putting you in an uncomfortable position Thursday night. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was emotional, and I made a choice that wasn't fair to you. Something cold settled in Ethan's chest. You're apologizing for sleeping with me. I'm apologizing for using you. Is that what you think happened? Isn't it? He stared at her. You asked me to stay. I stayed. Nobody used anybody. Ethan, don't do that. Don't rewrite what happened to make it easier for you. Her jaw tightened. I'm trying to be responsible here. By pretending it didn't mean anything? It didn't. Bullshit. The word hung in the air between them. Adrienne's expression flickered, just for a second, and he saw the woman from Thursday night underneath all that armor. Then it was gone. This isn't going to work, she said quietly. What isn't? This, us, whatever you think this is. I don't think it's anything. I'm just saying you don't have to pretend it was a mistake. It was. For you, maybe. She looked away, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I can't. Why not? Because you're not part of this world, Ethan. You don't know what it's like. I have a board meeting in an hour. I have investors breathing down my neck, asking questions about my personal life because my husband just left me. I have 12,000 employees counting on me to hold this company together. I don't have the luxury of... She stopped, shaking her head. I can't do this. Do what? Feel something. The words hit him harder than he'd expected. He walked closer, stopping a few feet away from her. You're allowed to feel something. Not if it gets in the way. In the way of what? Everything I've built. And what good is it if you're miserable? Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. You don't get to judge my choices. I'm not judging. I'm asking. Well, stop asking. I called you here to apologize and to make sure we're on the same page. What happened Thursday night was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. It won't happen again. Ethan felt something crack inside him, not anger, worse, disappointment. So that's it? You're done? There's nothing to be done with. Right, because I'm just some mechanic you called in the middle of the night. That's not what Isn't it? He took a step back, his hands dropping to his sides. You know what? You're right. This was a mistake. I should have left when you told me to. Ethan, thanks for the apology. I'll see myself out. He turned and walked toward the doors. Wait. He stopped, his hand on the handle, but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she said, her voice quieter now. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. How did you mean for it to sound? I don't know. She exhaled, frustrated. I'm not good at this. At what? At being honest. At letting people in. At admitting that maybe I don't have everything figured out. Ethan turned around. She was still leaning against the desk, but the armor was starting to crack. He could see it in the way her shoulders sagged, in the way her fingers were white-knuckled against the wood. "Then stop pretending," he said. "It's not that simple." "It is, though. You're just scared." "Of course I'm scared." Her voice broke. "I built my entire life on being in control, on knowing exactly what I wanted and how to get it. And then you showed up, and suddenly I don't know anything anymore. I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am, and that terrifies me." Ethan crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of her. "You think I'm not scared? You seem pretty sure of yourself." "I'm not. I'm a wreck. I have a daughter I'm barely holding together for, a business that's one bad month away from going under. And I just slept with a woman I have no business being near. But you know what? I'd rather be a scared wreck who admits it than someone who pretends they have it all figured out." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Be with someone who sees through me." "Then don't be with me. But don't lie and say Thursday night didn't matter." "It did." "Then say it." "I just did." "Say it like you mean it." Adrian's hands came up, gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. "It mattered. You mattered. Is that what you want to hear?" "Only if it's true." "It's true." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's so true it scares the hell out of me." He kissed her. Right there in her office, with the city spread out behind them and a board meeting waiting and every rational reason in the world to walk away. He kissed her like he was trying to prove something, to her, to himself, to the universe that kept throwing them together. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "This is insane," she said. "Yeah. We barely know each other." "I know. I'm still your boss, technically." "You're not my boss. You're a client I did work for 3 years ago." "That's a technicality." "It's the truth." She laughed, shaky and breathless. "What are we doing?" "I have no idea." "That's not reassuring." "It's honest." She rested her forehead against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. For a long moment they just stood there, two people who had no business fitting together but somehow did anyway. "I have a meeting," she said eventually. "I know. I can't cancel." "I know that too." She pulled back, looking up at him. "Can I see you again?" "You want to?" "Yes." "When?" "Tonight?" Ethan thought about Sophie, about the homework he had to help her with and the dinner he had to make and the life he couldn't just put on hold because he'd gotten tangled up with someone who lived in a completely different world. "I have my daughter," he said. "Bring her." He blinked. "What?" "Bring her. I'd like to meet her." "Adrian, I know it's fast. I know it's probably too much. But if we're doing this, whatever this is, I want to do it right. And that means meeting the people who matter to you." Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd expected her to keep him compartmentalized, a secret, something she could hide away from the rest of her life. But here she was, asking to meet his daughter like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You sure?" he asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "She's 7. She asks a lot of questions." "I can handle questions." "She might not like you." "Then I'll have to win her over." He smiled despite himself. "You're really serious about this." "I'm really serious about you." That stopped him cold. Because he'd been telling himself this was just a fling, a moment of weakness for both of them. But the way she was looking at him, like he was something solid in a world that kept shifting under her feet, made it impossible to pretend this was anything less than real. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" "Yeah. Dinner. My place. Says 6:30. Her eyes widened. "Your place?" "You wanted to meet Sophie. She lives at my place." "Right. Of course." She looked suddenly nervous. "What should I bring?" "Just yourself." "That's it?" "That's it." She nodded, smoothing down her suit like she was preparing for battle. "Okay, 6:30. I'll be there." "You know where I live?" "I'll have Laura find out." "Of course you will." She kissed him again, quick and almost shy. "I have to go." "I know." "Thank you for coming here, for not leaving." "Thank you for not letting me." She smiled, and for just a second, she looked like the woman he'd found on the floor Thursday night. Vulnerable, real, human. Then she straightened, pulling the armor back on, and became the CEO again. "I'll see you tonight." See you tonight. He left her office, walked past Laura Chen, who was pretending very hard not to know what had just happened, and took the elevator back down to the lobby. By the time he stepped outside, his hands were shaking. What the hell had he just agreed to? He drove back to the garage, parked, and sat in his truck for 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Adrian. Laura gave me your contact. I'm looking forward to tonight." He stared at the message, then typed back, "Me too." Another buzz. "What does Sophie like to eat?" "Mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, basically anything a 7-year-old would eat." "Got it. Should I bring wine?" "If you want. But I'm warning you, it won't be $4,000 Bordeaux. I think I'll survive." He smiled, pocketed his phone, and got out of the truck. He had 6 hours to clean his apartment, figure out what the hell he was going to cook, and mentally prepare himself for the most surreal dinner of his life. And somehow, despite every rational thought screaming at him that this was a terrible idea, he couldn't stop smiling. Sophie got off the bus at 3:15, backpack bouncing, hair escaping from the ponytail he'd put in that morning. She ran to him like she always did, and he scooped her up, spinning her once before setting her down. "How was school?" "Boring. We had a substitute in math and she didn't know anything." "That's rough. Can we get ice cream?" "Not today. We're having company for dinner." Sophie's eyes went wide. "Who?" "A friend of mine." "What kind of friend?" Ethan hesitated. He'd been dreading this question. "A lady friend." "Like a girlfriend?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." Sophie crossed her arms, suddenly looking way older than 7. "Does she know about Mommy?" "Yeah, she knows." "Is she nice?" "I think so." "What if I don't like her?" "Then we'll deal with it. But I want you to give her a chance, okay?" Sophie considered this. "Okay. But if she's mean, I'm telling her to leave." "Deal." They walked back to the apartment together, and Ethan spent the next 2 hours cleaning like his life depended on it. He scrubbed the kitchen, vacuumed the living room, hid the pile of laundry that had been sitting on his bed for a week. He even cleaned the bathroom, which was saying something. By 6:15, the apartment looked almost presentable. He'd made spaghetti and meatballs, safe, easy, kid-friendly, and set the table with plates that actually matched. Sophie was sitting on the couch, wearing her favorite dress, the purple one with flowers, because she'd insisted on dressing up. "Do I look okay?" she asked for the 3rd time. "You look great." "What if she doesn't like me?" "Then she's an idiot." Sophie giggled. "Daddy, you can't say that. I just did." The doorbell rang. Ethan's heart jumped into his throat. He looked at Sophie. "You ready?" "Are you?" "No?" "Then let's do it anyway." He opened the door. Adrienne was standing there in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. She looked nervous. Actually nervous. It was the most human he'd ever seen her. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was worse than I thought." "You're fine. Come in." She stepped inside, and her eyes went immediately to Sophie, who was standing by the couch, arms crossed, studying her like a scientist examining a new specimen. Adrienne walked over and crouched down so she was at eye level. "You must be Sophie. I'm Adrienne. It's really nice to meet you." Sophie didn't say anything, just stared. Adrienne held out the gift bag. "I brought you something. Your dad said you like drawing, so I thought you might like these." Sophie took the bag slowly, peeked inside, and pulled out a set of colored pencils. Not the cheap kind from the dollar store, the fancy kind. Professional grade. Her eyes went wide. "These are really nice. I'm glad you like them." "Thank you." "You're welcome." Sophie looked at Ethan, then back at Adrienne. "Do you like spaghetti?" "I love spaghetti." "Good. Because that's what we're having." Adrienne smiled. "Then I'm in the right place." And just like that, the tension broke. Dinner was chaotic and awkward and surprisingly wonderful. Sophie asked a million questions: where Adrienne lived, what she did for work, if she had any pets, why she didn't have kids, and Adrienne answered every single one with patience and honesty. She didn't talk down to Sophie, didn't try to impress her, just treated her like a person whose opinion mattered. By the time dessert rolled around, store-bought ice cream that Ethan had panic-bought on the way home, Sophie was showing Adrienne her son her drawings, explaining in elaborate detail the story behind each one. Ethan stood in the kitchen, watching them, and felt something shift in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Later, after Sophie was in bed and Adrienne was helping him clean up, she leaned against the counter and smiled. "She's amazing," Adrienne said. "Yeah, she is. You're a good dad." "I'm trying." "It shows." They stood there in his tiny kitchen, so different from the one in her mansion, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, this insane thing between them might actually work. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "Thank you for letting me be here. You can come back if you want." "I want." He kissed her, slow and soft, and when they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "This is crazy," she said. "Yeah, it is, but I don't want to stop." "Me neither." And for the first time since Thursday night, Ethan let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could figure this out. The next 3 weeks felt like living in two different worlds at once. During the day, Ethan was still himself. He fixed cars, drove Sophie to school, made dinner in a kitchen the size of Adrienne's closet. He paid bills that came too fast and tried not to think about the fact that his truck was making a noise it shouldn't be making and he didn't have time to fix it. But at night, after Sophie was asleep, Adrienne would text him. Sometimes they'd talk for hours. Sometimes she'd show up at his door with takeout and tired eyes, and they'd eat on his couch while she told him about board meetings and investor calls and all the ways her company was slowly consuming her alive. Other nights, he'd drive out to her place after Mrs. Tran agreed to stay late, and they'd sit in that enormous house that still felt too empty, and he'd cook while she watched like she was trying to memorize the way normal people lived. It shouldn't have worked. On paper, it was ridiculous. But somehow, in the small spaces between their lives, it did. Until it didn't. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was replacing brake pads on a Toyota when his phone rang. Adrienne's name flashed on the screen. He wiped his hands and answered. "Hey, I need you to come to the house." Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that meant she was barely holding it together. "What's wrong?" "Richard's here." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Your husband?" "Ex-husband." "Almost. He showed up an hour ago with lawyers. He's contesting the separation agreement, trying to claim he's entitled to half of everything because he supported my career." She laughed, but it was sharp enough to cut. "He disappeared for 3 weeks, and now he wants to take half of what I built." "Where are you right now?" "In my office, upstairs. They're in the living room with Gerald and my attorney. I can hear them through the floor." "Do you want me there?" "I don't know. Yes. No. I just—" She stopped. He heard her breathe. "I don't want to be alone right now. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up, told the customer he'd have to finish the job tomorrow, and drove north faster than he should have. His mind was racing. He'd known this was coming eventually, knew that her old life would show up and complicate everything. But knowing it and facing it were two different things. The gates to the estate were open when he arrived. There were 2 cars in the driveway he didn't recognize, expensive sedans with lawyer written all over them. He parked his truck next to them, feeling the contrast like a slap, and walked to the front door. Gerald opened it before he could knock. "Mr. Cole." "She called me." Gerald's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "She's upstairs, second door on the right." Ethan climbed the stairs, his boots loud on the polished wood. He could hear voices below, sharp, professional, the kind of conversation where everyone was being polite while preparing to destroy each other. He found Adrienne in her office, sitting at the desk with her head in her hands. When she looked up and saw him, something in her face broke. He crossed the room, and she stood, and he pulled her into his arms without thinking. She held on like she was drowning. "He wants the house," she said into his chest. "The house, the cars, half the liquid assets. His lawyers are saying I emotionally abandoned him, that I prioritized work over the marriage. Like that's a crime. Like I didn't build everything we had while he was—" She stopped, pulling back, her eyes red but dry. "I'm sorry. You didn't sign up for this. It's fine." "It's not fine. This is a mess. My life is a mess." "Then let it be a mess." She laughed, brittle. "Easy for you to say." "Is it?" That stopped her. She looked at him, really looked at him. "You're right. I'm sorry. That was—" "Forget it." She walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. "I don't know how to do this. The lawyers are saying it could take months, maybe longer." And in the meantime, Richard gets to drag my name through every tabloid and business journal in the state. The board is already asking questions. Investors are nervous. I'm supposed to be closing a merger next month, and instead I'm fighting my own husband over furniture. What do you want to do? I want to give him whatever he wants so he'll go away. But my lawyers say that sets a precedent, that if I cave now, he'll come back for more. So I have to fight. I have to turn my marriage into a legal battle and pretend I'm not falling apart. Ethan walked over, standing beside her at the window. Below, he could see one of the lawyers stepping outside to take a call. Expensive suit, Bluetooth earpiece, the kind of person who billed by the minute. You don't have to pretend with me, he said quietly. I know, that's the problem. How is that a problem? Because I've spent my entire life being strong, being in control, and when I'm with you, I'm not. I'm just... She shook her head. I'm just me. And I don't know if I like who that is. I do. She turned to face him. You barely know me. I know enough. You know the version of me that shows up at your apartment and eats spaghetti with your daughter. You don't know the version that fires people for missing quarterly targets. That tears apart companies and rebuilds them because it's profitable. That spends 80 hours a week in meetings and doesn't remember what it's like to take a vacation. So, that's still you. And it doesn't scare you. Why would it? Because I'm not a good person, Ethan. I'm not warm or kind or any of the things you probably think I am. I'm ruthless. I'm ambitious. I've hurt people to get where I am, and I'd do it again if I had to. He studied her, this woman who was trying so hard to push him away by being honest. You think I don't know that? Do you? Yeah, I do. And I'm still here. Why? Because everyone's got parts of themselves they're not proud of. You think I'm some saint? I've screwed up plenty. I've said things to Sophie I wish I could take back. I've let customers down. I've been angry and petty and selfish, but that doesn't mean I'm not worth knowing, and neither are you. Adrienne stared at him, her eyes shining. I don't deserve you. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? I don't know, but we'll figure it out. She kissed him then, desperate and messy, like she was trying to prove something to herself. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. I need to go back down there, she said. I know. Will you stay? Yeah. Even though this is going to get worse before it gets better? Yeah. She touched his face, her fingers soft against his jaw. Thank you. For what? For being here. For not running. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, straightened her shoulders, and became the CEO again. Then she walked out of the office and down the stairs to face her almost ex-husband and the lawyers who were about to tear her life apart. Ethan stayed in the office, looking out the window at the city below, and wondered how long he could keep that promise. The legal battle dragged on for weeks. Adrienne threw herself into work, which meant she was constantly exhausted. She'd show up at Ethan's place past midnight, eyes hollow, and fall asleep on his couch while he finished cleaning the kitchen. He'd wake her gently, walk her to his bed. He'd been sleeping on the couch those nights, and cover her with a blanket. In the mornings, she'd leave before Sophie woke up, kissing him goodbye with an apology already forming on her lips. You don't have to apologize, he'd tell her every time. I feel like I'm using you. You're not. I'm taking and not giving anything back. That's not true. But he could see the guilt eating at her, could see the way she was pulling away even as she kept coming back, like she was testing how much he could take before he broke. Sophie noticed. Kids always did. Is Adrienne okay? She asked one morning over breakfast. She's dealing with some grown-up stuff. Is she going to stop coming over? I don't know, sweetheart. I like her. I know you do. Do you like her? Ethan looked at his daughter, this little person who saw everything and understood more than she should have to. Yeah, I like her a lot. Then you should tell her. It's more complicated than that. Why? Because grown-ups make things complicated. Sophie rolled her eyes, looking so much like Anna in that moment that it hurt. That's dumb. Yeah, it is. That night, Adrienne didn't show up, didn't call, didn't text. Ethan tried not to panic, told himself she was busy, that something had come up, that she'd reach out when she could. By 11, he gave in and called her. It rang 4 times before she answered. Hey. Her voice was wrong, too flat, too careful. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. You don't sound fine. I'm just tired. You want me to come over? There was a long pause. I don't think that's a good idea. Something cold settled in his chest. What's going on? Nothing. I just need some space. Space from what? From everything. From this. I can't. She stopped. He heard her breathe. I can't keep doing this, Ethan. Doing what? Pretending this is going to work. We're not pretending. Yes, we are. We're playing house. I come over, we eat dinner, we pretend we're a normal couple. But we're not. You have a daughter and a life and responsibilities. I have a company falling apart and a legal battle that's going to drag on for months. We don't fit. That's not true. It is. And the longer we keep pretending, the worse it's going to hurt when it ends. So you're just giving up? I'm being realistic. Bullshit. You're scared. Of course I'm scared. Her voice cracked. I'm terrified, Ethan, because for the first time in my life, I care about something more than work. And I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be with you and still be the person I've spent 20 years becoming. And I can't. I can't lose myself again. I did that once with Richard, and it almost destroyed me. I'm not asking you to lose yourself, but you are. Maybe not intentionally, but you are. Because being with you means making space for something that doesn't fit my life, and I don't know if I have that space. Ethan sat down on the couch, his free hand pressed against his forehead. So what are you saying? I'm saying I need time to figure out what I want, to deal with the divorce and the company and all the things I've been ignoring because I've been focused on you. And where does that leave us? I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was making a mistake, to say all the things he'd been holding back because he was afraid of pushing too hard. But the exhaustion in her voice stopped him. Okay, he said finally. Okay? Yeah. Take your time. Figure it out. I'll be here. Ethan, I'm not going anywhere, Adrienne. When you're ready, I'll be here. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush him. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not making this harder than it already is. Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. I know. She hung up. Ethan sat there for a long time, staring at his phone, feeling like he'd just been punched in the chest. He should have seen this coming. Should have known that someone like her couldn't just fit into his life. That the differences between them weren't charming quirks, they were chasms. But knowing it didn't make it hurt less. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Adrienne didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at his door. Ethan threw himself into work, taking on jobs he'd normally turn down, staying in the garage until his hands were too sore to hold a wrench. Sophie noticed. She didn't say anything, but she started drawing pictures of the three of them, her, Ethan, and Adrienne, and leaving them on the kitchen table where he'd see them. It broke his heart every time. Mrs. Tran cornered him one afternoon while Sophie was at school. You look like hell, honey. Thanks. You want to talk about it? Not really. Is it that woman, the one who had dinner here? Yeah? She break your heart? Something like that. Mrs. Tran patted his arm. Then she's an idiot. She's not. She's just... He stopped. It's complicated. It always is. He smiled despite himself. Yeah. You going to fight for her? I don't know if there's anything to fight for. There's always something to fight for. Question is whether you think she's worth it. Ethan thought about Adrienne. About the way she looked when she laughed. The way she listened to Sophie like every word mattered. The way she'd held on to him in her office like he was the only solid thing in her world. Yeah, he said quietly. She's worth it. Then stop moping and go get her. It's not that simple. It never is. But you're not doing anyone any favors sitting here feeling sorry for yourself. She was right. He hated that she was right. But she was. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan got in his truck and drove north. He didn't call ahead, didn't text, just showed up at the gates and waited for Gerald to let him in. She's not expecting you, Gerald said when he opened the door. I know. She's had a long day. I'll keep it short. Gerald studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. She's in the living room. Ethan walked through the house, his boots loud on the floor. He found her sitting on the couch, not the floor this time, with a laptop open and papers spread around her like a fortress. She looked up when he walked in. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something that might have been relief. Ethan, hey, what are you doing here? I needed to see you. She closed the laptop slowly. I told you I needed space. I know, but I've been thinking about what you said, about how you can't lose yourself again, about how we don't fit, and I think you're wrong. Ethan, let me finish. He walked closer, stopping a few feet away. You're right that we're different. You've got this huge life, and I've got a small one. You're building empires and I'm fixing cars. But that doesn't mean we don't fit. It just means we have to figure out how to make space for each other. And yeah, that's hard. But you know what's harder? Pretending we don't matter to each other. I never said you didn't matter. But you're acting like it. You're shutting me out because you're scared. And I get it. I've been there. After Anna died, I shut everyone out for months because I didn't want to feel anything. But all that did was make me lonelier. And I don't want that for you. Adrienne stood up, her arms wrapped around herself. What do you want from me? I want you to stop running. I want you to admit that this, whatever this is worth fighting for. And what if I can't? Then I'll fight for both of us until you figure it out. She stared at him, her eyes shining with tears she wouldn't let fall. You're asking me to choose. No, I'm asking you to stop thinking you have to. But I do. My company is falling apart. The board is talking about replacing me. Richard's lawyers are dragging me through hell. I'm barely sleeping. I'm barely functioning. And you want me to add a relationship on top of all that? I want you to let someone help you carry it. I don't know how. Then learn. With me. She shook her head, but he could see her wavering. What if I fail? What if I can't do this? Then we'll fail together. That's not reassuring. It's honest. She laughed, broken and watery. You're impossible. Yeah, but you like me anyway. I do. She walked over to him, stopping close enough that he could see the exhaustion etched into her face. I really do. Then stop pushing me away. I'm trying. She stopped, her voice cracking. I'm so tired of being strong, of having all the answers, of pretending I have everything under control. Then stop pretending. What if I fall apart? Then I'll catch you. She kissed him then, and it tasted like salt and relief and something that felt dangerously close to surrender. When they broke apart, she was crying. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. Promise? Promise. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she finally let herself break. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. Even if okay looked messy and complicated, and nothing like either of them had planned. They stood like that for a long time, her face pressed against his chest, his arms wrapped around her like he could hold all her broken pieces together through sheer will. Eventually, her breathing steadied. The tears stopped. She pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I'm a mess, she said. Yeah, you are. She laughed, watery but genuine. You're supposed to say I'm not. I don't lie to make people feel better. I know. That's one of the things She stopped, looked away. Never mind. One of the things you what? She shook her head. It's too soon to say it. Say it anyway. I can't. Why not? Because once I say it, it becomes real. And if it's real, then it can hurt me. Ethan cupped her face, making her look at him. It's already real, and it's already going to hurt. That's how this works. But at least we'll be honest about it. Adrienne stared at him, her eyes searching his face. Then, so quietly, he almost didn't hear it. Love you. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and terrifying and impossibly true. I love you too, he said, because there was nothing else to say. Because it was the only truth that mattered. She kissed him again, softer this time, like she was sealing a promise. When they broke apart, she was smiling, actually smiling. What now? She asked. Now we figure it out, one day at a time. That sounds exhausting. It probably will be. Good thing I'm used to exhausting. They spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, about what they wanted, what they were afraid of, how to make space for each other without either of them disappearing. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were moments of frustration, of misunderstanding, of both of them falling back into old patterns. But they worked through it, slowly, messily, together. By the time dawn started creeping through the windows, they'd made a plan. Not a perfect one. Not even a good one. But a plan that felt possible. Adrienne would stop trying to do everything alone. She'd delegate more at work, set boundaries with the lawyers, and actually take time for herself. For them. Ethan would stop waiting for her to fit into his world and start making room for her in it. That meant Sophie needed to understand this was serious. That Adrienne wasn't just some woman who showed up occasionally. She was part of their lives now. It all sounded reasonable in theory. Reality, as always, was more complicated. The first test came 2 days later when Adrienne showed up at Ethan's apartment after work with her laptop and a stack of contracts she needed to review. Sophie was at the kitchen table doing homework, and when Adrienne walked in, she didn't hide her work. Didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. "I have about 2 hours of reading to do," she said. "Is it okay if I work while you guys have dinner?" Sophie looked up from her math worksheet. "Are you staying for dinner? If that's okay with you." "What are we having?" "Whatever your dad makes." Sophie considered this. "Okay, but you have to help me with my math after." Adrienne blinked. "I can do that?" "Good, because I don't understand fractions and Dad's bad at explaining." Ethan opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. "She's not wrong." Adrienne smiled, set her laptop on the counter, and sat down next to Sophie. "Show me what you're working on." For the next hour, while Ethan made chicken stir-fry, Adrienne walked Sophie through fractions with the same focus and patience she probably used in board meetings. She didn't dumb it down, didn't treat Sophie like a kid who couldn't understand complex concepts. She just explained it clearly, step by step, until Sophie got it. By the time dinner was ready, Sophie was beaming. "You're really good at math," she said. "I had to be. My job involves a lot of numbers." "What's your job?" "I run a company." "What kind of company?" "We make software that helps other companies manage their data." Sophie wrinkled her nose. "That sounds boring." Adrienne laughed. "It kind of is, but it pays for things like these." She pulled out her phone and showed Sophie a picture of her house. Sophie's eyes went wide. "You live there?" "Yeah. It's huge." "It is." "Is it lonely?" The question hung in the air. Ethan looked over from the stove and Adrienne met his eyes. Then she looked back at Sophie. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "but it's getting less lonely." Sophie nodded, satisfied with that answer. Good. They ate dinner together, the three of them, and it felt normal in a way that terrified Ethan. Because normal meant he was getting used to this. Meant Sophie was getting attached. Meant that if things fell apart, it wouldn't just be him picking up the pieces. After dinner, Sophie wanted to show Adrienne her drawings. The new ones she'd made with the fancy colored pencils. Adrienne sat on the floor with her, examining each one seriously, asking questions about the stories behind them. Ethan cleaned up the kitchen, watching them, and felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like family. Later, after Sophie was in bed, Adrienne finished her contract review at the kitchen table while Ethan sat across from her, sketching out a design for a custom exhaust system a customer had requested. They worked in comfortable silence, occasionally looking up to meet each other's eyes and smile. "This is nice," Adrienne said eventually. "What is?" "This. Just existing together. I've never had that with anyone." "Not even with Richard?" She shook her head. "Richard and I were always performing. Even when we were alone, we were playing roles, the power couple, the success story. We never just were." "And this feels different?" "Completely." Ethan set down his pencil. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What are we doing here? Long term, I mean. Because Sophie's getting attached, and I need to know if you're planning to stick around or if this is just—" "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "I know I freaked out a couple weeks ago. I know I pushed you away. But I meant what I said. I love you, and that means I'm in this. For real. Even when it gets hard? Especially when it gets hard." He reached across the table, and she took his hand. "Okay, then we're doing this. We're doing this." The divorce proceedings stretched on for another month. Richard's lawyers were relentless, dragging out every negotiation, contesting every asset. The media caught wind of it, and suddenly Adrienne's personal life was tabloid fodder. Pictures of her leaving her office, speculation about why her marriage fell apart, opinion pieces about whether women could really have it all. Ethan hated it, hated seeing her name dragged through the mud, hated the way she'd come home because his apartment had become home to her somehow, exhausted and defeated. But she didn't break, didn't run. She fought, and slowly, things started shifting in her favor. Her lawyers found discrepancies in Richard's claims, found evidence that he'd been planning this for months, that he'd been moving money into hidden accounts, positioning himself for a bigger payout. When they presented it to the judge, Richard's case fell apart. The final settlement was decided on a Friday afternoon. Adrienne called Ethan from outside the courthouse. "It's done," she said. "What did you get?" "Everything that was mine. He gets the condo we bought together and enough cash to make him go away. The rest is mine." "How do you feel?" "Lighter and angry and relieved and exhausted." "Come home." There was a pause. "Home?" "Yeah, come home. We're making spaghetti." She laughed, and it sounded like freedom. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. That night, they celebrated with cheap wine and pasta and Sophie showing off her latest math test, a 93, which she insisted was all because of Adrienne's tutoring. They watched a movie, some animated thing about talking animals, and fell asleep on the couch in a pile. Ethan woke up at midnight with Sophie sprawled across his lap and Adrienne's head on his shoulder. He looked at them, his daughter and this woman who'd crashed into his life and refused to leave, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. But peace, as he was learning, didn't mean easy. The next challenge came from an unexpected direction. Sophie's school called on a Tuesday morning to tell Ethan that his daughter had been in a fight. She'd punched another kid during recess and was being sent home for the day. Ethan picked her up from the principal's office, stomach tight with worry. Sophie sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, refusing to look at him. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked. "No." "Sophie, he said something mean." "About what?" "About Mom." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What did he say?" "That she's been dead so long I probably don't even remember her, and that you were dating that rich lady because you wanted her money." Rage and heartbreak hit him simultaneously. He pulled into a parking lot and turned to face her. "Sophie, look at me." She did, her eyes red but defiant. "First, punching people is not okay, you know that. He deserved it. Maybe, but you still don't get to hit people. We use words, not fists." Words didn't make him stop. "I know, baby, but that doesn't make it right." He took a breath. "Second, what he said about your mom is wrong. You do remember her. Maybe not everything, but you remember the important stuff, and nobody gets to tell you otherwise." "What about what he said about Adrienne?" "What about it? Is it true? Are you with her because she has money?" Ethan felt his heart crack. "No, that's not why I'm with her." "Then why?" "Because she makes me happy, because she's kind to you, because I love her." Sophie looked down at her hands. "Do you love her more than Mom?" "Oh, sweetheart." He unbuckled his seatbelt and pulled her into a hug. "It's not about more or less. I loved your mom. I still love your mom. She was my wife, and she gave me you, and nothing will ever change that. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and I'm allowed to love someone else without it meaning I loved her any less." "But what if you forget about her?" "I won't. We won't. Your mom is part of us, always. But that doesn't mean we can't have new people in our lives too." Sophie cried into his shoulder, and he held her, rubbing her back the way he had when she was little and had nightmares. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and her nose was running. "I like Adrienne," she said quietly. "I know. But I miss Mom. I know that too. And that's okay. You're allowed to feel both things." The kid at school said it's weird that I have a dead mom. "The kid's an idiot." Sophie giggled despite herself. "You said idiot. Sometimes people are idiots. Doesn't mean you get to punch them." "I know. Are we good? Are you mad at me?" "A little, but mostly I'm just sad that you had to hear that stuff." "Me too." They drove home, and Ethan called Adrienne, told her what happened. She showed up an hour later with ice cream and a stuffed animal, a rabbit, to match Sophie's favorite. I heard you had a rough day, Adrienne said, sitting on the couch next to Sophie. Yeah. Your dad told me what that kid said about your mom and about me. Sophie looked down. I'm sorry I hit him.
I'm not. I probably would have hit him too. Adrienne smiled. But your dad's right. We have to be better than the people who hurt us, even when it's hard. Do people say mean things about you? All the time. What do you do? I prove them wrong. I work harder. I get better. And eventually, they run out of things to say. She paused. But it still hurts. Every time. Really? Really? Sophie considered this. My dad says he loves you.
Adrienne glanced at Ethan, who was leaning against the doorway. He told me that too. Do you love him? Yeah, I do. And me? Adrienne's eyes got shiny. Yeah, Sophie, you too. Even though I'm not your kid? You don't have to be my kid for me to love you. You just have to be you. Sophie launched herself at Adrienne, wrapping her arms around her neck. Adrienne hugged her back, looking over at Ethan with an expression that said, Help me. I'm drowning in feelings. He smiled. Let her drown. She'd earned it. The weeks that followed were a strange kind of beautiful. Adrienne started spending more nights at the apartment than at her mansion. She learned Sophie's routine: homework before TV, vegetables before dessert, bedtime stories with different voices for each character. She started keeping a change of clothes in Ethan's closet. Started calling his place home without even realizing it. She also started making changes at work. Delegated more, hired a COO to handle the day-to-day operations. Started leaving the office at 6 instead of 9. Her board was skeptical at first, but the company didn't collapse. If anything, it stabilized. Turned out she was more effective when she wasn't running on fumes. Ethan, for his part, learned to navigate her world. He went to a company event with her, wore a suit that felt like a costume, and charmed her investors by being exactly who he was. No pretense, no performance, just honesty. They loved it. One of them even brought his Porsche to Ethan's garage the next week. On a Sunday morning in late spring, 6 months after that first phone call, Ethan woke up to find Adrienne and Sophie in the kitchen making pancakes, or trying to. The kitchen was a disaster, flour everywhere, batter on the counter, smoke coming from the pan. We're making breakfast, Sophie announced proudly. I can see that. Adrienne said she'd never made pancakes before. Clearly, Adrienne flipped a pancake, which immediately fell apart. This is harder than it looks. You run a $4 billion company but can't flip a pancake? Apparently not. Ethan took over, salvaging what he could, while Sophie and Adrienne sat at the table, covered in flour and laughing. They ate burned pancakes and didn't care. Made plans for the day, park, then lunch, then maybe a movie. It was ordinary, unremarkable, perfect. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Adrienne and Ethan sat on the fire escape outside his apartment, looking at the city lights. I've been thinking, she said. About? Selling the house. He turned to look at her. Your house? Yeah, it's too big, too empty, and I'm never there anymore. Where would you go? She looked at him. I was hoping you'd let me stay here. Here? This apartment? Too fast? No, I just... He stopped. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. What about your stuff, your life? My life is here, with you and Sophie. Everything else is just things. Ethan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Yeah, you can stay. Just like that? Just like that. She laughed, pressing her face into his neck. I love you. I love you too. They sat there for a while, watching the city breathe below them, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come. From that first night when he'd found her broken on the floor, to this, a life they'd built together out of loneliness and courage, and the stupid decision to stay when leaving would have been easier. 3 months later, Adrienne sold the mansion, moved into the apartment officially, bought a ring, and proposed to Ethan on a random Tuesday night while they were doing dishes. This is insane, he said, staring at the ring. I know. We've known each other less than a year. I know that too. What if we're making a mistake? Then we'll make it together. He kissed her, soapy hands and all. Yeah, let's make mistakes together. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just Sophie, Mrs. Tran,
a few close friends, and Gerald, who cried during the vows and refused to admit it later.
Adrian wore a simple white dress. Ethan wore the same suit from the company event. Sophie was the flower girl and took her job very seriously. During his vows, Ethan said, "I don't know how to promise you forever. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I know I want to figure it out with you, all the messy, complicated, impossible parts. I'm in, for real, for always."
Adrian said, "You showed up on the worst night of my life and refused to leave. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone, that success without connection is just expensive emptiness, that love doesn't have to make sense to be real. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to be a perfect wife or a perfect stepmother, but I know how to show up. I know how to stay, and I promise I will, every single day." They kissed, Sophie cheered, Mrs. Tron cried, and Ethan realized something he should have known all along. Saving someone didn't mean fixing them. It meant staying long enough for them to remember they were worth saving. It meant showing them that being broken wasn't the same as being beyond repair. Adrienne had saved him just as much as he'd saved her. They'd found each other in the wreckage of their old lives and built something new. Something that didn't fit any mold or follow any rules. Something that was theirs. Years later, when Sophie was grown and people asked how they'd met, Ethan would tell them the truth. That he'd gotten a call in the middle of the night, that he'd broken into a mansion to find a woman who'd lost herself somewhere between success and survival. That they'd made every mistake in the book and somehow ended up here. And when people asked if it was worth it, the risk, the mess, the impossibility of it all, he'd look at Adrienne, at the life they'd built, at the family they'd become, and he'd say yes. Every single time, yes. Because sometimes the best things in life don't make sense. They don't follow plans or fit into neat categories. They're just two broken people who refuse to let each other stay broken, who choose connection over isolation, who understand that love isn't about being perfect together. It's about being imperfect and staying anyway. That was the lesson, the one that mattered. You don't save people by fixing them. You save them by reminding them they're not alone. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they save you right back.